Welcome to Akasha Talks, a podcast on consciousness, healing, and different ways to interact and weave those together, both old and new, to be able to get the most out of your life. I'm your host, Lance Baker, coming to you from Newcastle, Australia. Hope you kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome, Rowan. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Lance. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So I invited Rowan on. We've been friends for years, and he was keen to come on the show before, and I was like, I've got to find the right subject. And as you all know, this is very rare that I've been putting out podcast episodes lately. And I saw Rowan put a comment on a group, and I can't even remember what one, but it was under an article of somebody sharing a study on aphantasia and how under functional fMRI machines, it's still showing the brain activity is there, that it's just not connecting. And you said you'd been able to find some workarounds with different practices to do it. It's like, there we go. I've had too many people reach out after Paulina's episode saying, what can they do? And I've had different little ideas as well. So I thought this would be a great thing to have us do a little workshopy chat of some different ideas. And if you're interested, instead of hitting me up with questions, you can hit Rowan up, and he can walk you through some sessions to help build that skill within you. How does that sound, Rowan?
Yep, sounds perfect.
Fantastic. So, Rowan, do you have aphantasia yourself?
I do, yeah. I found out when I was quite young as well, like you did, that my brother could see things in his mind's eye and I couldn't. So for me, it's just blank. I have no, or I had no ability to visualize things clearly or remember what feelings were like or hear internal sounds. So basically, my main visual, audio, kinesthetic senses were sort of just not there. I could dream perfectly well, and I had a lot of lucid dreams and things like that, and weird experiences of falling out my body and stuff when I was a child, but I wasn't able to consciously control the ability to just see things in my mind's eye. Like, I can't see the red apple. It's not there.
Okay. What about inner dialogue?
Inner dialogue, yes. And there's a data transfer as well. It's separate from the internal dialogue. So I think it'd be interesting to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's go data transfer now. So we're getting a bit of a basic picture of your mind. What's the data transfer?
So this sort of, it ties into my understanding of all this through my sort of esoteric practices and meditation and things like that. That there's the internal senses and the external senses. We've got 5 external senses plus our voice, and we've got the 5 internal senses plus our internal dialogue. And we can look at this as sort of the dream body or the astral body or the ka, if we want to call it that as well, and the mental double. And for me, like I noticed in your podcast the other week that you were talking about this internal dialogue describing stuff effectively from what your out of conscious visualization that's happening, out of conscious awareness. You're getting this sort of descriptive thing going on with your internal dialogue. Would that be right?
Yes.
So I don't get that. I get like a data download from my internal senses into my conscious mind.
Yep.
And it's like I was sitting with it after I listened to you talking about that and trying to separate out whether I was having an internal dialogue explaining things, but I don't. It's literally like a data transfer.
Yep.
So,
That yeah. So the data transfer is just like a feeling for you.
no, it's like the information of what my mind's doing on an out of conscious level is just there in my conscious mind.
Yep.
I don't see the image. So like when I work with memory palaces and things like that, I just know where everything is. It's not that my internal dialogue has to describe that, oh, there's this location here with this thing in it. It's just my mind knows it. So it's like a data transfer. It's like an instantaneous data transfer.
Okay. Excellent. There's the guy who I was talking to you about this morning, Dr. Russell Hurlbut. He's got a lot of stuff on that as well. So you're going to really enjoy digging into his work. I know you're going to get some stuff out of it. He comes up too often in conversation with me. I found a new email address for him, so hopefully he's going to say yes and be my next guest to give you some extra information. So with the inner dialogue you get then, would it be inner hearing or inner speaking? Is it you talking to your mind or your mind talking to you? Or both?
My mind talks to me and I can talk to my mind and I can have conversations with my internal dialogue. So it's really, I can actually just have a conversation with it and it'll give me answers. And yeah, it reads along when I'm reading text.
Yes.
And when other people are speaking, it speaks along with them.
Yep.
And I can change its voice and do things like that with it. So I can get it to sound like goofy or, it's really quite powerful, my internal dialogue.
Excellent. Mine is just my voice.
Mhm.
But exactly the same as what you've described there. But it's all the one voice, which is annoying. I'd love characterization on that. Okay, so you said you've been able to make some differences. What's the difference level that you've got now?
So I still class myself as aphantasic because I have a blank screen, but at the same time, I also class myself as an extremely good visualizer.
Mm-hmm.
And with the practices that I've done over the last 10 years, I've been able to, like, through consistent work, get to a point where I can quieten down the external senses enough to be able to access the internal senses.
Mm-hmm.
And this really ties into, I think, neurodivergence, because there seems to be this sort of correlation, at least the people with autism and high functioning autism and ADHD and things like that, there's a high correlation with aphantasics. And I've also got a question on the hyperphantasics as to whether they're the good subjects. If they've got all of those senses open, are they the sort of high responders in hypnosis? And there seems to be, from my experience working with clients, a little bit of a correlation going on there, but it's not scientifically tested, so
No,
we can't say for sure.
anecdotally,
But
for me, I would agree. The ones I've
yeah,
been.
so with the neurodivergence, there's a question in my mind as to, you know, we've got this neuroplasticity thing that goes on. So what fires together wires together. And if someone hasn't developed their ability to open the internal senses, because when we're born as children, like when our brain's developing, it can't visualize.
Mm.
When the cells are separating in the womb, it's not visualizing stuff. It has to learn how to do that and create that wiring at some point. And I think this ties into what you were sort of speaking about with this chap's work, that this is something that we have to learn. So if we've not developed this, or it's not possible for us to develop it, whichever be the case, our mind will have to work out strategies to work around that. And does that cause the neurodivergent wiring, or is the neurodivergent wiring causing that? It's the chicken and the egg scenario, isn't it?
It
It's the same
is.
with ADHD, like, is the ADHD and this lack of the development of focus with ADHD, or the ability to control the focus of attention, is that part of what causes the neurodivergent wiring in people with ADHD, or is it the other way around? And I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that question, but it's an interesting one to think about.
It
Can we
is.
create an increase in the neurodivergent wiring within our mind doing these sort of practices? And
I'm curious about it. So Russ's work that I'd mentioned earlier, he does descriptive experience sampling. So like you wear a beeper, there's a little earplug in your ear, you walk around all day with that, and half a dozen random times through the day it beeps, and you got to record your thoughts at the moment of the beep, not what was happening before the beep, not what was happening once that beep went off, just for the bit of while it's gone beep, just that, of what's your inner experience. And he says most people actually have no idea of what their inner experience is like when they start it compared to when they finish it. The way their mind actually communicates to them is different than what they feel overly happens. Like lots of people think they've only got inner dialogue, and then when they're testing it, it's other stuff. It's not mainly that or mainly visual, blah, blah, blah. All different. He did say that most people that are visual are more creative, and most people that are auditory are analytical, in his view, which again fits that model of the good hypnotic subjects versus the difficult hypnotic subjects, according to most hypnotherapists, whether analytical or creative. Different workarounds, though. I don't really believe in that being a better hypnotizability. It's better if you're a stage hypnotist, but for actual work, I find it doesn't really matter at the end of the day for change with the way I work. But there was a bit I was reading in one of his books yesterday morning where he's talking about this kid he's done this descriptive experience with, because with the beeper, they sit down with him or somebody else doing the study, and they go over each of these 6 beeps in the space of about an hour, 45 minutes. So it's basically 10 minutes per beep. They express what it is, and 2 interviewers go backwards and forwards to work out how that beep works. But he's doing it with this kid, and the kid's talking about playing with his toy, but thinking of this hole in the backyard that he's got, that he's putting toys into in his imagination, and he's only got what was it? He's described it. The kid said, "Except the real hole has more toys in it. If you'd beat me in a couple of minutes, I would have had time to finish the picture." So the kid was building the picture in his mind. But when Russ is working with adults, the picture's normally there. Pictures might grow a little bit, but not be built. Like the kid, the way he's described it in other bits there was he was playing. He was building it in his imagination like he was playing, and that's what he was doing instead of like playing with the cars. He'd paused to imagine this other game he was playing. And so Russ said his speculation in the intro to this book, I haven't finished reading, so he might actually change that speculation into a C. We'll get there. Is that these kids are building the ability, and it's learnt. And not everybody does that. And then that's in the intro, and then I got to, I think, the second or third chapter, and he's talking about a girl who is a bit older, but still a child, in maybe early high school, I think it was, and she's part of a school band, and she was building the school orchestra in her mind and changing the way it all went to fine tune it all. So in her mind, the band could play better than what they could play in real life, that she could build the auditory sounds. And he was backing that up again with his reference to this child earlier, that we build this process. And so it was great. Like, it just lit me up yesterday when I read this. I've explored heaps of his work, and I hadn't heard him talk about this is able to be built. And so that got me extra fired up for this chat and what we're postulating could be there. And after that, I was in my head, and I was like, well, we hear of heaps of people with aphantasia now. And the word didn't even exist not very long ago. And how much of it's built recently, like over the last 40 years, we've had people raised with these visual devices that give us images. Is it that we just got lazy because we've had images thrown at us, that we haven't sat and built this up? Like, I had no meditative experience until I was an adult, and that it just opens all sorts of questions for me. If I was a more bored child, would have this developed?
Yeah. I think that touches on a key point, that if we don't flex this muscle, it atrophies. And this is the same for memory. You know, there's been studies done on people that are memory champions and work with things like memory palaces, and they have thousands more neural connections in their brains than people that don't do memory. And the interesting thing is that I think it's about 6 weeks of memory training with specifically Locky and memory palaces. Uh, the brain of the individual actually changes to have these extra connections. And this happens all through life, right up into our like 80s and 90s. We can create these new neural connections, especially if we're using it alongside supplements that turn on neurogenesis, like lion's mane and things like that. So it's one of these things that if we do the practice and do the exercises that have been in the esoteric traditions for as long as we've been on this planet, I think, you know, if we do those exercises, we will get results. It's just most people don't put in the effort that they need to actually create these shifts.
Mm.
So all of those senses are there in most people. I think there's exceptions to that rule with things like damage to the brain and stuff like that, or people that have never had sight, for instance. And they might never have been able to learn how to use the visual cortex, so they just don't have the ability to see anything. But there's
Yes.
other people that have been blind from birth that do get visual stuff happening, which is strange as well. But in general, I think for most people, all of these senses are there. And one way of looking at it is sort of like having your 5 internal senses and your 5 external senses. And with someone who's aphantasic, they're like over here. But with someone who's a good visualizer, they're right next to each other.
Mm.
And someone who's like schizophrenic, for instance, that sees characters in the real world and hears voices and stuff, they're sort of overlaid. And this is the shaman. This is the sort of initiate that's got to a level of opening both eyes to the world. They can see the dream world and the physical world. And through the different practices that I've done over the years, I've got to this point where I'm actually seeing my thought forms overlaid over reality. And if you don't do the practices, it fades a little bit again. But it's got to a point where I can be aware of that dream mind
Yep.
and those internal senses, even if I'm not actually seeing them.
Yeah.
So there's an element of a descriptive problem and potentially a creation of a mental block by labeling ourselves as aphantasic.
Yes. Yes. I've found the more I've played with this, can it be reversed? Can the skill be grown to do the opposite? And so like initially my thought was, can it be healed? And I didn't like that because it's like, well, I'm not hurt. And it's like, can the skill be grown? Since then, I've found I've been able to start to get little bits happening, and it has helped with just your concept of um the way you described the data download and stuff like that. Like I have a bit of that there as well, and like I said, I can visually describe photos
Mhm.
that are there in my mind. So I know I can see it because some part of my mind is pointing at it and going, over here's this, and then over here's this, and over here's this. And it's like, well, it's there. So that bridge has to be able to be built. And at various stages of my life, I've been an incredible lucid dreamer. And at
Mhm.
other stages, I've been, I can't dream. Uh, and I know all I have to do is a few little practices and dream world is there.
Mhm.
That this is all just work. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not a you're aphantasia or not. I feel it's I'm lazy or I'm not.
Yeah. And like there's a couple of things there as well. So with clients that I've been working with, if I ask them the question of, like, can you imagine walking on a beach or walking on wet grass and feel the sand under your feet or things like that? If you immediately after them ask afterwards, now, did you feel that in your feet or did you feel that in your mental double's feet? Some of them will say, no, it was my feet. But most of them come back and say, well, yeah, it was my mental double's feet.
Yes,
And
that's definitely how it is for me.
yeah, so it's this like separate body.
Yeah.
compared to your physical body. And we can call it like lunar body or the astral body or whatever, but it's that separation. And with lucid dreaming, everyone that I've come across that's very good at lucid dreaming either does some form of martial arts, yoga, and some form of sort of energy work in that respect, or they're polyphasic sleepers, or have gone through a period of doing polyphasic sleeping.
Yeah.
And polyphasic sleeping is really interesting, especially if you do short naps at specific times of the day. And on a side note here, like meditation practice, polyphasic napping, things like that, if we do it at the same time every day, it like the circadian rhythms and ultradian rhythms in our brain start to get used to the fact that, okay, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to do a 20-minute nap or 20 minutes of meditation. So it allows our brain to preempt that and go, okay, I'm going to go into this state at this point. And for the sort of practices that we're doing here for opening these internal senses, this is really important. We'll get a much bigger of effect if we're doing it at the same time and even the same location on a day-to-day basis. Because if you think about it, if you're eating regularly, your body's going to start producing digestive enzymes and things like that for processing the food that it knows it's going to get. And the
Yeah.
same with sleep. If we've got a regular bedtime of like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., whatever, our body will start to produce sleep hormones so that we can fall asleep easily. And the
Yeah.
same is true about waking up. So our body likes to automate these sort of processes. So doing our practice at the same time every day will give us a much better result than just sporadically doing these exercises.
Mm. An extra layer of that Pavlovian effect. Like
Yeah,
ring the bell yourself.
yeah,
Uh,
that's it.
and you touched on something there that I have found with when I have been able to get some visual stuff happen. Uh, it has had energy every time. Energy has been involved. So like you gave me some practices to do, and one that worked. I was doing energy with it. The one I talked about on the podcast with Paulina, I was at a dream yoga class and they were doing energy with the room with it, as well as we were doing a chant. So
Mhm.
energy was there. It happened. And there's other times that I've had snippets of stuff come through and surprise me. It has been while energy's been running through my body.
And like with that practice, did you do, because you said it was dream yoga, did you do like a yoga nidra where you're quieting down the body?
In the in the group bit, we were just sitting in like basic classroom chairs sort of thing in this guy's lounge room that he has as like it's a Gnostic center. So it's his temple.
Yeah.
And he does temple stuff there all the time. There's some shrines there. There's posters that are essentially mini shrines as well all around the room. Uh, he dimmed the lights, we turned the lights off, lit the candle on the shrine, and we're doing a chant. Uh, so uh,
With a gaze at the candle or?
eyes closed. Everybody with
Eyes
eyes
closed.
closed. So the chant is to build. The chant was only to build your energy up for lucid dreaming later on. And he's like, some people have got to do this for like weeks. Some people will lucid dream tonight from this. I didn't lucid dream that night. I didn't do that practice enough here. it's it's on the to do list.
Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent.
Exactly, exactly. But I was seeing blue stuff happen behind my eyes with it, and I was like, it took me out of it because I was like, holy shit, it's like I'm seeing something already. Like this is powerful. I was like on day one of that class, so I was like, this is going to be great.
And like this is a key as well. Like dark rooms are one of the really good ways of starting to work with this sort of stuff. Any sensory deprivation, float tanks, darkness meditation, all these sort of things, because they're effectively shutting out those external senses or dumbing them down in some way. So with
Yeah,
floating tanks, we're effectively losing the body and the connection with, because the water's body temperature, the air's body temperature, and our body's body temperature. So we lose the boundary between us and the world. And meditations where we do sort of mind awake, body asleep, things like Monroe Institute and the Gateway Experience and these sort of things, we're doing that as well. We're dissolving the physical body. And
Yeah.
these sort of things allow us to shut down this data that's coming in, and this ties into the neurodivergence as well, because it's generally a filter problem where we have too much sensory data. There's a lot of people with autism and high functioning sort of neurodivergent disorders, or gifts, I would rather say. Neurospectacular is a better word for it, because we are,
Yes.
we get more data points coming in. So is it just that our external senses are so loud that we're not aware of the internal senses, and we have to quieten them down a lot more than someone who doesn't have that neurodivergence?
Mm. It's an interesting concept that I think is playing some ingredients there
Yeah.
with that. And float tanks are a brilliant point. When I first started doing what I do, I was working out of a float center. Uh, I clocked up a lot of hours in a float tank, and I was expecting, like, the very first float I went on um, was because I'd heard like Joe Rogan's thing and seen the thing on The Simpsons. I was like, yeah, shit, this is going to be it. This is going to be what opens up a visual thing for me. I was incredibly disappointed it did not happen.
Mhm.
uh, but I did find that contact with that inner me changed in there. That threshold was much easier to cross, and I experimented somewhat with shamanic journeying in there, and I found it really easy to do in there.
Yeah.
Much easier than it was to do out of the tank. But in the hundreds, maybe thousand-ish hours I've spent in a tank, I never had visuals. Now I think maybe I'd be able to do some practice and I might be able to get there, but didn't before.
And like, this is really a part of sort of what I do with myself and with clients, is like teaching your mind how to effectively stop paying attention to those external senses and start paying attention to the internal senses. And it starts small. We're starting off with maybe movement behind the closed eyes, or like subtle geometric shapes appearing, or things like that. And that might move into fractals and mandalas, and sort of kaleidoscopic images of color, like the things you get with Lucia and Roxiva and these sort of light meditation devices that we use. And
Yeah,
those,
I'm going to get you to pause there because
yeah.
you've brought up something that has always done my head in. The Lucia and the Roxiva that you've mentioned. Most of the audience probably has no idea what those words mean, so you might have to explain them a little bit. Uh,
So yeah, there's a few of them, isn't there? There's Agna, I think it is, and there's Pandora Star, Roxiva, and Lucia or Lucia, and they're all using what's technically called steady state visually evoked potential. So SSVEP is the technology, and this is used in universities all over the world for doing tests. Where there was one I was reading about where they had a guy watching a monitor, and they were creating a flicker pattern on the monitor, and that was triggering his brain to produce specific brain waves that were then being picked up by an EEG and transmitted into a rat via an ultrasound to make it wag its tail. So they were using this sort of chain of stimulation to show that you could do this stuff. But essentially, any repeating rhythm will produce an entrainment of specific brain waves. So, shamanic drumming, binaural beats, tapping, these sort of things. So, like, one of the weird things with EFT is we're tapping on this KC point, and if you tap at about 4 cycles a second, then you're stimulating theta brainwaves, which is going to help with visualization and holding someone in a theta state. So by doing that with our client when we're in person with them, we can help hold them in a place where they're more likely to be able to visualize and stay in that sort of meditative space that we want them to be in when they're in a session for EFT. But light's an interesting one, because if we're using things like binaural beats or isochronic tones or things like that, or even tapping, all of this is using our body's own electrical signals, electrical energy. And this, what, a couple of wires going in from your ears to your brain, whereas your optic nerves are millions of the nerve cables.
Yes.
and your retina converts photons into electrons. So the light that comes in through your eyes actually creates an electrical signal in your brain that's not your own body's electrical energy. So by using steady state visually evoked potential through the eyelids with closed eyes or through a blindfold or whatever, we're actually bathing the brain and the nervous system with new energy. And there's been research, I think it was in Melbourne University actually originally, but there's been research done all over the world with Alzheimer's and brain plaques and what these specifically 40 and 60 hertz frequencies. I think originally it was done on 40 hertz, and they did an hour a day for 7 days on rats and mice with Alzheimer's and got a 75% reduction in, I think it was about 75% reduction in hard and soft plaques in their brains. So effectively reversing the disease in a week in rats and mice using this 40 hertz, 1 millisecond bursts. And that's now been repeated all over the world. But we can use these things, the research is showing that we're getting entrainment in under a minute to theta and delta frequencies. So we're going basically super deep really quickly. We've had Buddhist monks going under it, going that, this takes me a place it would take 4 hours of meditation to get to and just holds me there for the hour. And we've got EEG output showing that this is happening. So these light machines can be used alongside hypnosis to keep people in state. They can be used for, listening to a recording of a session afterwards. You can put them under the light machine with the headphones on and let them sort of go over the session that you did with them before that you've recorded and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good uses. But for what we're doing here, they can take our brain to a place where it knows what meditation is. So
Yeah.
normally when people start meditating, it's like running through a wood with the lights off and not knowing where the destination is. You don't know what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't know what it's supposed to feel like or what's supposed to happen, and you're like, am I doing it right? Whereas if you can switch this on,
It,
it takes you there.
it also feels like a massive gaslight as well. That like I did the Lucia number 3 like a
Mhm.
decade ago, a bunch of times, and I think I did it again maybe 5 years ago or something. Just a
Mhm.
one-off again, um, and I was blown away. Like the kaleidoscope that was happening, that was constantly changing. Like my full field of view,
Yeah.
stuff was happening, and that just blew me away. I was like, whoa, this is. He told me this opens up DMT, and like this is psychedelic. And
Yeah.
the first time I had a blindfold on, and it was like in this little tent thing in a expo, New Age expo sort of thing. So the next time I went to his house, and he had me in a room by myself with it. So then I pulled out my phone. I filmed his light machine for a little bit because I was like, it's changing colors. It's changing colors. That's what it's doing. It's because it's hooked up. It had a music thing that I was listening to. I was like, it's hooked up to the music thing, and it changes colors like those Philips Hue things, which weren't invented then, I don't think, but still, the changes color based on sound or image or something. I was like, it's hooked up to something like that. It's on a pattern, and so I'm
Yeah.
filming. I was like, I got home and looked. I was like, it's just a blinking white light. It's just, and that really messed with me. I was like, well, it's just light, and the rest of it was my mind making something happen. I'm like, well, why can't my mind make that happen? I've heard of people saying like these kaleidoscope, super psychedelic meditation things happen for them, and I'm like, oh, what's going on there? Why is there this gap, and why can it be filled with this just a simple blinking light?
And like what's going on there is very similar to a psychedelic experience. If you take something like psilocybin or LSD, different areas of your brain are firing together in ways that they wouldn't normally.
Mm.
And because of the overload of energy going in through these strobing lights and the way they interact with the brain, they're doing the same thing. They're making different parts of the brain fire together. And what fires together wires together. So using these devices regularly can actually shift and move you into a space where when you close your eyes, you start to see those patterns and those colors and those fractals. And, I use mine regularly. I initially saw a documentary on Vice, I think it was, Who Needs Drugs, Baby, I'm High on Light. And they were using a Lucia in
Yep.
London, in some bar in Soho, like create art in your mind. And I came across a guy that was doing demos with this sort of stuff, and he came up and gave me a shot. It was a different device, a Pandora at the time. And I had a demo with it, and half an hour like of this hypnagogia program, I was seeing dream images, and I'd never seen stuff in my mind's eye before, especially like consciously awake. I've had dreams and like lucid dreams and stuff like that.
I
But
couldn't get proper images. I could just get geometric shapes changing. So
yeah,
this,
well,
this is even more amazing.
this is the difference between the Lucia and the other ones that are on the market, because the other ones on the market can be programmed by us as practitioners
Mhm.
or users of these devices. So you can actually build your own programs with the program generator.
Yeah.
And so with things like the psychedelic stuff, in my understanding of it anyway, it's moving you through the beta frequency range of brainwaves that creates those sort of psychedelic patterns. Whereas if we take you into more of a sort of theta alpha board, or even down into the edge of theta delta, we're starting to get into that dream space. So if you think about it like this, like our awareness is engaged in our conscious mind, and we're making lots of different brainwaves all the time while we're awake. But as we learn to meditate, we learn to hold awareness at deeper levels of mind. So we start off going into sort of, alpha brainwave states when we're meditating, and then we start to go into theta brainwaves. And that's when we start to maybe see dream images and get into that space. The Monroe Institute stuff is, excuse me, is basically trying to take you to just below the delta theta border. So when you start thinking, it always brings you up a little bit. So it's bringing you back up into theta, which is sort of associated with REM sleep and dreaming and things like that. But part of the sort of goal of meditation is to eventually be able to be aware through dreamless sleep, and it's training for being able to stay aware through the gateway to death.
Yeah.
So if we can use these devices to create programs that will hold us at specifically deeper and deeper states, and our job's basically to stay aware, to focus on the mantra, focus on the breath, focus on the movement of light behind our closed eyes, whatever it happens to be, and maintain that awareness at those deeper states. Now, I've built programs that go down into epsilon, so below delta, sub 1 hertz. And the first time I ran it, first thing in the morning, I'd built the program the night before. I ran it first thing in the morning, and it's an hour-long program, and it knocked me out. And then I had a half hour of lucid dreaming afterwards and woke up. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I chucked it on again, and again, it knocked me out. And again, half an hour of lucid dreaming, and I woke up. It's like, okay, like third time's the charm. So stuck it on a third time, and again, it knocked me out, and half an hour of lucid dreaming and back awake again. And this is using, epsilon frequencies with a harmonic in there as well. Because if we put an entrainment of 10 hertz in, we'll get all of the harmonics of 10 coming off in a sort of curve, and the subharmonics. So if we put in 10, we'll get 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And we'll also get a subharmonic of, I think, 5. So a half harmonic appearing in there as well. So if we create a program that has 10 hertz and 12 hertz, it's going to create a huge interference pattern. If we do one with 10 hertz and 40 hertz, we're using a harmonic of 10 hertz anyway. So we get this harmonically tuned program.
Mhm.
And there's a school of thought that it doesn't really matter about these harmonics. But in my intuition, we love harmonic. We like harmonically tuned music. If something's not harmonic in a piece of music, it sounds wrong. And so in my view, our body system, our mind system likes harmonics. And in my experience, the programs that I've made for myself with these harmonically tuned programs allow me to go much deeper, much quicker.
I'm curious what you described there, like they're going in and out 3 times.
Yeah.
Were you were the dreams more lucid or were they the same or less? What
They
was
were
there a
they were about
difference?
the same on all three occasions, but that program I've still never managed to sit through it completely and stay aware.
Yeah,
It always knocks me out. It's maybe just the last 10, 15 minutes of the program, but it always knocks me out.
that's
Uh,
pretty incredible.
yeah, it's difficult to maintain awareness, but I'm getting better at it. Initially it was like within 10 minutes of the start of the program, I was gone. Now it's like maybe 10, 15 minutes before the end of the program that I'm gone. So I'm getting to the point where I can hold awareness at that really deep level.
Depending
Uh,
on what sort of things people want, that could be a good skill you've developed, or you could be wasting your time. But if lucid dream was the aim, then you're being counterproductive. If you're trying to capture your inner experience better and build rapport with your own exploration in a waking state, then that's great. So look, like either way you flip that coin, something amazing is happening.
yeah, well, like those deep delta and epsilon frequencies, naturally when we're in deep sleep cycles, which is our sort of body recovery healing cycles,
Mm.
um, that's the frequencies we're making. So because of the disease that I've had over the last 10 years, I've been trying to increase my deep delta frequency sleep.
Yep.
So I made one program that I don't know if you've seen the graph of the perfect sleep cycle, where you go down into delta and then up into REM, and it changes through the night. The delta, the deep sleep cycles get shorter, and the REM get longer through the night.
Yes.
So I programmed a 7.5 hour program on one of my light machines for doing this, and using it against the white ceiling to create the flicker, so it's not like directly on my face all night. And my sleep tracker gave me the perfect sleep cycle graph.
That's incredible. And
So
I'm curious with like uh you use this with clients and you do demonstrations at places all the time I've seen before. What sort of interaction does it have for you with these better machines than the Lucia with the complete novice, with the first time experiencer?
people want to know what's going to happen, and
Yes.
you're like, I can't
Uh,
tell you.
no, there's
You
no
know?
way they could explain it to me just with the Lucia.
Yeah. Essentially, like what I say to them is, this is going to create a novel state experience. Your mind's not going to know how to process this. So, if effectively, it creates a space where your mind opens for new learning. So, if you have something that you want to work on, set intent for this session, and we'll give them a little 4 minute demo, and they come out and going, that was crazy. And then you, at that point, you go, and that was just white light. And they go, like, yeah, all those colors, all those patterns, that was just your mind responding to the white light. And then you turn it on and you show them, and they go, oh. And, that initial 4 minute demo is quite a powerful experience, but it does a lot of pulling through different frequencies. And it gives us an idea as to how someone's going to respond to a longer program.
Yeah.
So if someone's feeling anxiety in that or doesn't like the experience, then I'll just give them a refund and they won't get the longer program. I'm not going to put them under something that they're not going to enjoy. But doing things like holding the peripheral gaze while they're in that space. So this is one of the things that I say to them is like, be aware of what's going on at your periphery. Focus on that. And like, as you probably know, that's a hack to keep us in parasympathetic arousal.
Yes.
So, and it's also a hack for opening the internal senses, because this gazing at the internal light, if you close your eyes and roll them up in your head, like as far as they'll go, especially in a dark room, you'll probably start to get an element of light. And the earliest I found this is in the ancient Hawaiian tradition. I think it's called hakalau, if memory serves. But you basically gaze at a point above eye level and then close your eyes, very similar to hypnosis,
Yes.
and keep your eyes rolled up and watch the light, and then expand your periphery. And if you allow it to, it'll keep expanding outwards. And so this opening of the visual field is, I think, extremely important in working with, both these light machines and, what we're here to talk about, which is, you know, being able to be aware of those internal senses that are there in all of us, I think.
Mm. There's another thing I used to do when I was a kid. I've never actually talked about this with anybody because I always thought I was a freaking weirdo.
I'm a weirdo, so it's fine.
Yes, everybody that listens to this podcast is somewhat of a weirdo. So anyway, no offense, people. uh, I remember doing it when I was a kid. I love like rubbing my eyes because I'd see sparkles of color and geometric patterns. And if I did it right, I could move through them. And it was I remember thinking about like being a spaceship flying through like I was Luke Skywalker or something. In my imagination, while just putting that slight pressure on my eyes. That that's the first point that I knew of that I could create something
Yeah.
in my mind. And for a long time, that was the only way I thought I could create an inner experience. Um,
Yeah. Well, you can use that to start things off and then reduce the pressure.
yeah.
But I mean, I did something very similar in maths class in secondary school. I used to sit there bored and cover one eye and push a pencil in the side of my eye to create a little bit of pressure. And you get a little black spot appearing on this side. And after a while, your vision goes into tunnel vision and you can see what seems to be like veins in like neon yellow or green. Or I could, at least anyway. I wouldn't recommend doing it because I don't think it's very healthy for your eye
No,
to
so
pressure
viewers
to
at
sit
home,
there.
no, that one's probably more unsafe to do.
Yeah, do not do that at home. But this is what I used to do as a kid. So yeah, like you're not alone in, in weirdness, but that pressure in the eyeball, it's putting pressure on the retina. It's putting like it's creating a sensation in the eye.
Yes,
Um,
I always presumed it was an optical illusion with that one. But like just this past week, because my mind's been so much on this topic since you said yes, I was wondering with that of well, how much of that is it 100% physical thing, or is some of that is I'm crossing that threshold of what that fMRI is picking up happens in our brains that I don't see, and that's just the placebo bit that my mind's gone. I'll give it to him. I'll let him have this one.
yeah. It's like, I mean, with the eye roll, like looking up above your sort of where you're feeling like you're straining your eyes a little bit, rolling them up. That's putting pressure on the optic nerve as well. It's doing the
Yes.
same sort of thing, so it creates the same sort of effect. And with the pressure on the side of my eye, the tunnel vision that I was getting is very similar to the fighter pilot fog that you get if you do like gaze inductions. So if you focus on a single point of like something over there and fix your gaze and hold it without moving it, you start to get this sort of fog coming in and electric lines around things and stuff. Have you experienced this?
I never did. I've done a lot of gazing over the years
Yeah.
for the mesmeric. It's widened my peripheral. And when I'm doing the practice, like the days around when I do the practice, my peripheral's way wider. It certainly helps when I'm working with clients. But I didn't notice much happening with that. The best I got is a couple of times, like my face changed, or I'd get this overlay where my face is exactly the same, but I've got four eyes, all
Yeah.
lined up one next one other, and that would be it for the weird stuff happening. I didn't get the. I was waiting for the electrical stuff around me because lots of my
Mhm.
peers and my mentors had said that's what sort of stuff would happen. Nope.
So, like when we're reading and things like that, it's actually the micro movements of our eyes that allow us to read. If we stare at something for long enough, and this is why this optical illusion, the one with the squares, and you get these spots appearing between all the squares as you look at
Yes.
it. It's
Yes.
how that works as well. It's the movement of our eyes allows us to see the difference in color. So if we can fix our vision without any of those micro movements happening within our eyes, and this is like, again, like putting something on the side of my eye like that stops me being able to move my eye around.
Mm.
So it holds this fixed point. And that's the point where this grayness comes in, because our mind stops being able to tell from these micro movements what's actually around us. So it creates this graying of the visual field, and you get almost a sort of, if you've ever worked with Photoshop and used the emboss filter, it creates something that's similar to that, in my experience anyway. So yeah, it's an interesting one though.
Yeah. And so I don't want to give away all your secrets, because you got to develop stuff and make a living and everything. But is there something that you'd be happy to share, at least to start a bit, for people at home to practice to get something? You gave me a couple of things to try, and
I mean, there's a few different ways that people can get here, but essentially what we need to do is we need to silence the external senses, or quieten them down enough to start to be able to be aware of these internal senses. So it's like, on a side note here, something that I was taught when I was learning hypnosis and NLP as well, actually, is the VAK systems, visual audio kinesthetic. And we have a series of questions we ask our clients, close your eyes. Can you picture a horse? No. Like, can you feel my hands on your shoulders? Can you hear a piece of music? Can you smell something? Can you taste something? So we're checking which of those senses is open and which is not. And most people have one more open than others. For me, with the internal dialogue, audio is actually more open. I can sort of hear music in my mind, but it's not like I can hear it out there. And so it's not quite the same. But I was taught to find the sense that was most open and use that for the induction. So if that's the internal dialogue, then we use the internal dialogue for the induction. But if it's visual and kinesthetic that they've got most open, then we can use that for structuring the way we lead them into a trance state, and then start bringing in audio suggestions. And as they start to experience those audio phenomena happening in their internal space, they'll have effectively a convincer that they're in an altered state. And there's exercises for this in certain books, like Mind Games, I think's got a series of exercises for this. But essentially, we want to be looking at, which of those internal senses do we have the most development in, and using that as our gateway into the other senses. And so we can go through this through meditation. If we do things like shamanic journeying, image streaming is another good one, where you just come up with something. So give me a subject.
pyramids, since there's pyramids behind you there.
Pyramids. Okay. So we're at the pyramids, but they're not in Egypt, they're in Antarctica. And there's these weird ice sculptures all around it. So you're just like relaying what your unconscious is giving you. You're not trying to come up with a story, you're just allowing the story to unfold. So the ice structures are depicting aliens, like my brain goes there. Whatever happens next, so it's like a what happens next story in your mind, but you're just allowing your unconscious to give you what's happening next. And if you do that in a dark room with your eyes closed for long enough, you should start to experience something more than just a data stream or an internal dialogue giving you information. And with ADHD, if we train focus, we can reduce the symptoms of ADHD. With someone who's not creative, if we do image streaming meditations, we can increase creative function. So there are two sort of branches of meditation that can both be used in different ways for developing focus or developing creativity. Memory's the other really powerful one for me. So building memory palaces, building a Locky map. So this is probably the easiest and quickest route to it, to getting an understanding of this, is, sitting somewhere quiet and remembering that house you grew up in and trying to visualize walking through it, and first person perspective rather than third person perspective, which actually reminds me of something that was mentioned in your talk the other week with Paulina, about future pacing. And quite often in hypnosis, we'll ask someone to see themselves in the future. Now listen to the language there. See yourself in the future. That's third person perspective. If we ask them to step into the future and look back from that position, that's first person perspective. So if we change that language in our future paces, we can get more association with the future pace than disassociation.
Yes, I got in my head about that with like manifestation things. I used to run this like new moon manifestation process, and I do some energy stuff behind it, some ritualistic stuff. But I get people to imagine three different things in deep things, and I guide them into a trance to do it. But because I didn't know what would work best of first person or third person, I get them to spend like 5 minutes imagining it first person, and then 5 minutes to imagine it third person. So that, like I'm like, I don't know what one works. I'm hitting both angles because I'm not a visualizer. I couldn't test myself what approach worked best, and I always found with my way of creative bit, I could feel like I could describe it better in a body than observer.
It sort of like one of the real things that sort of hit home for me was Tad James's SMART goal setting. I don't know if it was him that created it, but it was him that I learned it from. And it's a variation of the standard SMART goal setting. So it's what specific, measurable. I can't remember what the A is in the original. Actionable, yeah. So instead of actionable, he goes as if now.
Okay.
Realistic and time oriented.
Yep.
So we're stepping into it as if now. It's this date. I'm checking my bank balance. It's got this in it, or this is just happening. I'm looking back and seeing all of the choices and changes that I made to get here.
Yep.
And I'll do 3 future paces. And then on the third one, I'll get them to do a universal parts integration, which I also do in, like, if I'm doing regression stuff, which has to be done very carefully for false memory reasons and stuff like that. But you can do something cool when you educate your client on the fact that they only ever experience their own mind. They don't experience anything outside the veil of the senses. It's all in their head. From the moment of the Big Bang to the end of the universe, everything they know about everything is all just in their mind. They've never seen a face, they've never felt a touch, they've never smelled a flower or tasted chocolate or seen a sunrise or sunset. That's all in their mind. It's your mind doing that. It's beautiful. So your mind's a universal mind, and it dances with everyone else's universal mind in the multiverse. And so this is all part of how I do pre-talk with clients if I'm going to do regression work with them. And I talk to them about memory and how memory can be falsified very easily. And Erickson's, it's never too late to have a happy childhood and all these sort of things. And you can then at that point get the unconscious mind as the universe to accept this new way of being. And it's cool. It works really well if you do it at both ends, at the regression and at the future pace. Or if you're just doing metaphorical stuff, if you do it just at the future pace, So that's a sort of side note there. But with the memory stuff, if you can walk through a memory palace as best as you can with the sensory information that you've got, just get a feel for it, get an idea of it, get an imagining of it. It doesn't have to be visual. When I first started doing this, I didn't see anything, but I knew it was there because of this data transfer happening. And I used the path from where I got the bus to school to the back door of my parents' house. And then as I got better at it, when I go through the back door of my parents' house, I now go into my grandparents' big estate house that they used to live in. And I've got all the rooms there. And then you can add doors to walls where there wasn't a door, and it can take you into things like the British Museum and stuff like that. And you can expand and expand and expand. And this is the fractal nature of memory. I don't think there's a limit to it.
Yeah.
And with that, what we're doing is we're moving something that was out of conscious awareness, which is effectively a part of the mind called the central executive, which takes the sensory information that's coming in just now through all of the sort of RAM buffers of our mind body system and connects them to the stuff that's already in our subconscious. So it's building the pattern, it's building the story of what this new information means to us. And with memory palaces and things like that, we're hacking this central executive and taking conscious control of building these long-term storage links. So that gives us a way of pulling this information back up at a later date. So if I want to know what the fifth card is in one of my memory stacks, I look at the fifth location in my memory palace and get a feel for what's there. And in one, it's the Queen of Hearts, and another, it's the Four of Hearts. Like, so I can store multiple stacked decks in multiple different memory palaces and cut to any card in all of the decks and stuff like that. Which is,
Do you have your deck nearby?
I think I've got one through room. Yeah, I can grab it if you want.
Because you did it to me the other day, and it blew my
Yeah.
mind. So I want to help everybody listening, watching at home to like
Let me grab it.
see he walks his talk.
You're putting me on the spot here as well.
Yeah, I am. Well, you brought it up on the fly the other day, and we're able to do it. So it just blew my mind.
Let's check these. Yeah, that's one stack.
So if you're just listening at home, you might want to come back to watch this on YouTube because there'll be a visual element of this one.
Yeah, so name a card.
Do it with the deck on screen because you did it like that the other day. I want people to know there's no trick with this.
I've got two different stacks here with two different memory palaces with them.
Rightio. Three of spades.
Three of spades is like, I'm off by one on that one. Yeah. And then in this deck, the three of spades is, yeah. Oh no, that's the two. Wait a second, sorry. I'm out by 5 there. Yeah, there.
Still amazing. That's incredible. And that's using the memory palace.
And you can jump back and forward between them as well. So like there's two decks there. I'll put them just out of sight. So this is the 10 of spades, and then the 4 of clubs, and then we've got the 10 of clubs. Sorry, 5 of diamonds and 2 of hearts, and then the 10 of clubs, and then the 7 of diamonds. So you can like jump back and forward between different memory palaces and see everything that's going on. With these, the way that I do it's different from the way most magicians and memory experts do it. They use something called the person action object, PAO system, or Dominic system. I'm not doing that. I'm using the esoteric meaning of cards, because cards effectively come from the tarot deck. So each of the 4 suits is associated with one of the 4 worlds in the Kabbalistic system. You know, you've got the fire, water, air, and earth. And there's something there as well as to why is water above air, but we can go into that another time. So essentially, when I'm looking at like the 10 of spades, it's actually Malkuth in the air kingdom.
Yep.
Or swords. You know, if I'm looking at the 5 of diamonds, it's pentacles, so it's the earth, and it's Gabura. So I can do this Kabbalistic interpretation, and these, you know, the cards themselves and the tarot deck itself are what's called corporeal similitudes. So they're visual memory palaces with information stored in them if you understand how to read the symbolic language.
Yeah.
And this ties into Renaissance art and the memory art of sort of Hermetic memory art and things like that, and how they encoded information in their pictures, because you could get killed for some of the stuff they were talking about back then. So they had secret messages and secret languages of symbols that they could use to store information in plain sight. And those that were initiated could read it, and those that weren't just thought it was a piece of art. So
you've got a street magic trick there that is linked with your real magic knowledge, essentially using a magical process that is also a non-magical process.
Yeah, essentially. So initially, like, I mean, in this deck, the 5th card is the Queen of Hearts. And initially, when I first started doing memory stuff, I wasn't so well versed in the esoteric stuff. So she was a queen with her heart, with a hole in her chest, and she was holding her heart in her hand, and it's beating, and I can smell that iron. I'm imagining all this. Like, I'm not actually experiencing it, but I'm imagining there's a smell of the iron and things like that. And I trust my unconscious that it's doing the work. It's making the picture. It's hearing the sound. It's smelling the smell. I'm just not aware of it.
Mm.
And this ties into how we work with aphantasics with therapy. We don't need them to visualize it. We don't need them to be aware. We don't even need them to have the internal dialogue explaining what's going on. We just need to tell them that, look, you might not be able to visualize very well, but trust that your unconscious is doing that.
Yeah.
And we don't need them to have any awareness of the experience that's going on, really, as long as we can just get them to trust that the unconscious is following along and doing what we're asking it to do. So, you know, I used to build this. Now I just chuck 6-foot playing cards into the locations. So I can walk along memory palaces really quickly and just throw 6-foot playing cards. And a 6-foot playing card stuck into a tree on a path is really, really obvious to me. But because I'm storing them as cards or numbers and sort of symbols of different worlds, I can do a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that, like, this is a 3-dimensional object. So if I'm looking at it from above, I can see something on it. But if I'm looking at it from this side, I can see something else. If I'm looking from this side, I can see something else, or this side. So you can store 6 different shuffled decks in one memory palace and look at it from different perspectives, or imagine it from different perspectives, and get this string of information coming through your data transfer as to what's what and what's where. And if you then put markers of what each location's number is pegged onto those locations as well. So in this deck, I've got every 5th location marked. In this deck, I've got every every single location mark.
Yeah.
So like, I know the 30th card's the 10 of hearts and stuff like that. So it's a slightly more complex memory palace that I've built for this deck compared to the one that I built for this deck. But this was the first memory palace I ever built.
Yeah.
And like, as I said before, the more we work with this, the more this neurogenesis happens within the mind. So if we can build these memory palaces and just start, like, I initially started with 13 cards with a quarter of a deck. So I had a 13 location memory palace, and I expanded it and filled in, like, found other locations between the locations that I'd found initially. And I
Yeah.
doubled it up, so it was 26, and then I doubled it up again, so it was 52. And so we can expand this stuff, but getting something simple like just the walk to the local shop, or using your living room. I can use, like, this bookcase is one location, this bookcase is another, the table is the third, and so on and so forth. But do it in a sequence around your room, so you're, like, walking in the room and turning left and then following the sequence round the room or something like that, and just work with it and be consistent with it and do it the same time every day, and you'll start to get a really powerful effect. And if you can do that by taking the time before you start to sit and do a meditation. So I do something that I call brass body. And initially it started off using a sort of almost a hypnotic language with myself, going like, okay, pay attention to your feet, just your feet. Be aware of the sensations in your feet, and tell all the muscles, all the tendons, all the nerves, and all the cells to relax, switch off, sleep. So I'm using this suggestion on myself all the way up through my ankles, my shins, my calves, my knees, all the way up. And then when I get to my waist, I look at my feet again and be aware of the energy that's permeating through my physical body and around my physical body. And at that point, I'm dissolving the physical, and I can't feel exactly where my toes are or my feet are. And it's happening just now as I'm saying it to you. But, like, I'm effectively switching off and making all of the nerves, all the cells, even all the molecules and atoms, you go as deep as you want with this and get them to relax, switch off, and sleep.
And you're
And
also trying to connect with that car body at the same time in that
well,
process, in that sense.
I'm not even
Switch to.
actually trying to connect with it at that point. I'm just trying to dissolve the physical.
Okay.
So I used to do this, and then after practicing that sort of process enough times, I was like, I wonder if I can just do this as a wave. So I would lie in my bed or sit on my chair or my meditation posture, whatever, and just feel a wave coming up through my body. Now, what's catalepsy in hypnosis? If we do an arm catalepsy, is that any different from sleep paralysis in a single part of our body?
Probably not. Yeah.
Are we creating effectively a mini sleep paralysis in someone's arm? And one of the really powerful things that I came across was this ability to pretend. And it's an absolute game changer. So I thought, I wonder what would happen if I just pretend that my body's asleep and I can't move it. And if I put my hand on the table and pretend that my hand's stuck to the table and really pretend and hold on to that pretending that my hand's stuck on the table, it can feel stuck. And I can pretend that I can't lift it. Now, for some people, they'll get a genuine like a hand stick with that sort of thing. But for me, I know I can release the pretending and lift my hand.
Yes.
But, if I close my eyes and pretend that I can't open my eyes, I genuinely can't open my eyes until I stop pretending that I can't open my eyes. So I thought, what if I pretend I'm in sleep paralysis and pretend that I'm asleep and pretend that I'm dreaming? And that's a fun one to play with. But the brass body's basically pretending that my body's turning to brass and it's a wave moving up through my body. And it does exactly the same thing as this progressive switching off of the system. Um, you know, it's probably a little bit more of an advanced technique for some people, but play with it. Um, I'm certainly happy to take people through the relax switch off sleep. I've got an audio for it somewhere. I think possibly on my website somewhere, but it might be not visible. So I'll have a look and see if I can send you that, and you can chuck a link on it.
Yeah.
Um,
If you found it, it's in the show notes, everybody.
Yep. So yeah, doing that sort of practice where you're taking the time to go through some form of even just a progressive relaxation to sort of try and switch off, but do it with the suggestion that your body's going to sleep, and it's like relax, switch off, sleep. And I think there's something there in the way we do hypnosis these days as well, because we very rarely use the word sleep unless we're doing stage hypnosis.
Mm.
We sort of err away from it and tell our clients that, this isn't a sleep state. You might appear to be asleep from the outside, but you'll be perfectly aware all the way through it. And does that stop us going to a certain level? Because in the old hypnosis, in the direct hypnosis pre-Erickson, you would quite often get things like clairvoyance and these sort of things happening, and people having, very interesting experiences in some of the experimental stuff, like Lacron's experimental hypnotism book. He's got some stuff on this. And so have we lost something by not using that language anymore? And, I can put myself to sleep by just telling myself to go to sleep every time I exhale in my head using the internal dialogue, and I'll
Yeah.
be asleep within minutes.
Yes, I'm the same. I can go to sleep within 20 seconds. No
Yeah.
matter what time of day it is, really. If I want to sleep, I can put myself to sleep.
So using that language of telling the body to relax and switch off and sleep, but keeping the awareness aware before you do the exercise of working with the memory palace, or these sort of things, that can be a really powerful way of helping you shut down that external senses so you can be aware of the internal stuff that's going on there all the time. And people that get good at lucid dreaming, like I've been in periods, I'm not there at the moment because I've not been keeping up the practice, but when I'm doing the lucid dream work practice regularly, I become aware of the moment that I'm waking up in the morning and the dream's fading and the external noise is starting to come in from my external senses. And the same happens in the evening when I'm falling asleep. I can watch my external senses quietening down, and I become aware of the dream that's happening all the time. So it's like these internal senses, this dream images, the shamanic journeying, whatever we want to call it, is going on all the time. And we're just not aware of it. And it's only by quieting the senses that it's like the volume on this is so high that we can't hear this. And as this volume gets turned down as we're falling asleep or doing these exercises of shutting down the external senses, we start to be able to be aware of this.
Yes. Yeah, I'm on the same page there. I think that sort of stuff happens. I'm terrible at grabbing like the hypnopompic and hypnagogic states to
Well,
feel
this
that
is
point. But
yeah, this is where the polyphasic stuff comes in, because if you're doing, and like Tesla's a good example here, because he could apparently build machines in his mind and test things before he built them in the lab. And he was a polyphasic sleeper.
Yeah.
Da Vinci was a polyphasic sleeper, I believe. Churchill was biphasic and apparently ran rings about all of his peers. But if you do polyphasic napping specifically, and like 20-minute naps are ideal really for this, that 1.5 hour sleep cycle, it's normally a deep sleep cycle and then an REM cycle and then waking up, gets condensed into 20 minutes. So in that condensing of it, the bands between being awake and being asleep also get condensed. So it's easier to be aware of this shift between being awake and aware of the external and asleep and aware of the internal.
Yeah.
So it becomes easier to learn to lucid dream if you do that sort of practice. So
Yes.
using that alongside the other exercises like memory work and doing meditation and things like that, and using dark rooms and sensory deprivation or sensory overstimulation like the Lucia and other light machines that are out there, all of that works together. So I wouldn't choose a practice and do it. I would choose a few different things and integrate them into your lifestyle.
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I adapted what you gave me the other day, and it worked well for me. I got something happening on the very first time.
This is the key is like, taking what you're taught and making it your own. And, if something doesn't work, like this is like one of the ways that I've got here is being curious, what if? It's like this pretending to be asleep and pretending to be in sleep paralysis and pretending to be dreaming. I found if I started doing that, I could just switch over. And last night I tried an experiment with my internal dialogue where I asked it a question. I was like, have you blocked my ability to visualize? And its answer was yes.
Yep.
And I was like, was this due to trauma? And it was like, no, not really. And I was like, well, what was it then? And it was like, you used to visualize stuff that scared you. So when I was a little kid, I used to come up with ideas about monsters under the bed and the darkness in the corners and things like that. And so I asked it, you know, could you switch it on? I'm not asking you to switch it on, but could you switch on my ability to visualize? And it was like, yes. I was like, do you want to? It was like, no. I was like, well, if you switched on, could you switch it off again if we need to? Yes. With that knowledge, would you be happy to switch it on, knowing that we can switch it off whenever you want? Yes. And I started seeing visions. They weren't very clear. They were this sort of like chalk outline in the darkness, but it's not been exercised for a long time. I've not been aware of it for a long time. And that was an instant result just by having this conversation with my internal dialogue. And that was purely the curiosity of play after listening to what you and Paulina were talking about with your internal dialogue.
Yeah.
So be curious, try things out and play. And your mind likes to, like the other exercise that I showed you that I'm not going to go into here because it's quite an advanced one. It creates a sense of play with the unconscious mind. And if we have a need to develop something for survival, so like if it's related to our work and it allows us to get money so we can feed ourselves and keep a roof over our head, we'll learn it fast. So like baristas get good at remembering people's regular coffees, waiters get good at remembering what table ordered what, and so on and so forth. Lecturers and teachers get good at remembering names and faces because it's needed for their job. And it doesn't have to be needed. It can be like needed through a game of play, and all animals learn through play. If we try and do something with a level of tension in our system, we don't learn. If we do it through a state of play, then we learn really quickly, and all animals learn this way. So if we can do these exercises from a place of play and curiosity and fun, and not make them a chore, make them a game, then we'll learn so much faster.
That's a pretty powerful point because yes, whenever I've tried this, I haven't done it with play. I've been like, or business about it with myself.
No,
But I've
do it.
tried to
Do it.
tie in that my living sort of thing. Like the more I can understand other people's inner experience, the better I can help other people's inner
Mm,
experience. And this is what does my head in, though. My mind's helped me get that. Like it's helped me to
mm,
understand all these different kinds of inner experiences and how that that spectrum is so different for everybody,
mm.
and to find ways to understand what theirs should be like, but it's never given me the experience of the spectrum where play it might open up more.
It really does. And like where I first came across this is actually a book that's up there somewhere. Um, it's the HUNA system. So Secret Science Behind Miracles by Max Freedom Long and his other works. And there's an exercise in one of them. It might actually have been in Serge Kahili King's HUNA stuff, but it's befriending the low self. And they believe that we have three parts. We've got a middle self, the conscious mind, a low self, the subconscious, and a high self, the superconscious. And the low self, the subconscious, can talk to the high self very easily and get divine information and like all that sort of psychic stuff, if we want to call it that, and you know, all sorts of crazy esoteric stuff, occult stuff, whatever. But the conscious mind, the middle self, can't speak to the high self directly. It has to go through the low self. So we have to befriend the low self to access the high self. And in order to do this, we start basically building rapport. So it's a little exercise. You just ask your mind what its name is
Yeah.
and let it answer. And it might not give you a name straight away. It might be a while. Like my subconscious likes, or unconscious, whatever we want to call it, my genius mind is RG. I was called Rowan John because my mom had an uncle RG that she really liked. So I got RG when I was a little kid, and that's the name it likes. And the next exercise is asking your that mind, introducing yourself, and asking it for its favorite memory. Now, I had my father give me a plane that he'd built out of wood that had a spinning propeller and all this stuff. And when I was 4 or 5 years old, I think about 5 years old, and I'd only managed to lift it and walk about 6 feet with it. It was that heavy. And then, like a couple of days later, it got dismantled because it was just too big and heavy for me. But when my subconscious gave me this memory, it gave me it with a different perspective. It showed me the love and attention that my father had put into building this. And it also showed me that that was about the time that my big brother decided he wanted to be a pilot. So it didn't just show me the attention and love that my dad made there. It showed me something about my brother and the fact that, like, he'd had a difficult connection with mom, and I was born on my father's birthday, so I was like, I had this really strong connection with my father, and I think he wanted that connection,
Yeah.
and he was copying me. And I've noticed since then that that's happened a few times through my life, and it might just be my perspective. It might not actually be real. It might be cognitive
Some
bias going on there, but it
interesting
showed me this
archetype.
memory I thought was painful and a sad memory as this beautiful, happy memory, and completely
Yeah.
shifted my viewpoint. So that this is the start of befriending the low self and creating rapport with your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And when we start to work with these things, the more we do this sort of stuff, the more of these processes and aspects of what is out of conscious awareness start to move into conscious awareness. So we get a growth, and it's done through play. It has to be done through play. It doesn't
Yeah.
work
No, that,
if
that makes a lot
you're
of sense.
defying.
Like
Yeah.
I've just had a light bulb moment now. Like
Good.
of the amount of like people's subconsciouses that I've got direct voice from that
Mm,
have made comments uh, that they like me better
mm,
than they like their person. Because I always presume just because I'm giving it what it wants in a way, but half the time, and it's the opposite of what it's doing. I'm helping it be liked by the conscious self. Is the reason why it likes me? Is you've got this person who's hated me for years to start to like me, but I'm always playing. with that when I work. I'm always playful. I want to get down to business, but I do it in a very playful way. And yeah, I'm showing attention to the thing that's been ignored. So
Yes.
it's somebody's come to play. And
So do that with yourself.
yeah, I don't do that enough with myself. I do get a little bit too brass tacks rather than play.
We're all guilty of it, I think. And like, Bob with the way he works, with the swan and stuff like that, it's all play.
It is.
That's
Well,
the
Bob's been one of my greatest mentors.
Yeah,
That's where
exactly.
play comes so big into my work. I watched him be cheeky, and the rest I'm like, he's having fun. Why don't I have fun too? And then I realized it's the fun that's working.
I think like a really big aspect of this as well is, we are all children who've learned how to behave as grown-ups.
Mm.
When we're little kids, we're told that we need to decide what we're going to be when we're grown up.
Yes.
And, like you need to study to be successful. The presupposition is we're not successful. You need to like choose what you're going to be when you grow up. What's that all about? There's loads of these things that are suggestions through what's not said rather than what's said. And they
Yes.
can be even more powerful because we've never heard the suggestion. It's gone straight into the unconscious as a space rather than a verbal suggestion. And essentially we're pretending to be these different roles in society, but we're kids playing in the sun, dancing with our own reflection. We're
Yeah.
not seeing the world out there. We're seeing a reflection of what's going on in our mind based on filters and sensory information coming in and distortions and deletions and all this stuff that's going on because of cognitive biases and everything else. So like we're effectively just kids dancing in the world in the sunlight, pretending that we're experiencing the world when we're just experiencing ourselves. So why not do it with play and fun?
Yeah.
There's massive power in just shifting that. So
There is. There is. Um, yeah. Yeah. I give too much.
mm,
Um, I give it a lot of attention with like self introspection and stuff. I'll occasionally play, but when I've been trying to shift this stuff, I've not done it in play at all, which makes so much sense. Yeah.
look and see if there's anything else that. Yeah, like it's a muscle.
Yes.
All of this stuff is a muscle, and it's like if you go to the gym and do the same workouts over and over again in the same sequence, it's boring as you know. But if you go
Yes.
in there and like I had like I was in there the other day with a friend and like I was like playing like a monkey and he was looking at me like slightly embarrassed and I was like, come on, we're in a gym, like this is a jungle, play, like
Yes.
it's if we bring fun into everything we do, it's so much easier to learn and it's just it shifts everything.
Yeah. When we're talking there before, I'd had a download in the middle of that. Those data dumps with a little bit of voice of like kids with paper. Like I had a paper and like rough drawing. It's like my mind was trying to tell me, yeah, you've been trying to do architectural drawings.
Mhm.
We're not there. Crayons, buddy.
Yeah, yeah, go slow,
Have
be
some fun.
patient
Yes.
with your clients and with yourself.
Yeah.
Like Paulina and you guys were talking about how if you're working with clients with aphantasia, go slow because it takes them a little bit longer to get that build.
Yes.
And it's important to apply that to yourself. And I really like this idea of treating your out of conscious mind as your little friend, like your little brother, whatever. It's we often give it nothing but abuse. Oh, you can't do this, you're not good enough, like all these like negative self-thoughts and anxiety loops and things like that. And it's not fair, it's like give it love. Like one of the exercises from the HUNA system from Serge Kahili King's books is positive programming. And it's an exercise that I used to get over my internal dialogue being negative, and it's absolute gold. And instead of being like trying to find the silver lining and stuff, so like, this is my favorite cup just now. If I broke it, I could be like, oh well, I've given it the end of its life cycle and all this, and trying to find some silver lining. But if I just go, I just successfully smashed my favorite cup, I just successfully crashed my car, I just successfully broke my arm, it instantly moves us into observer and allows us to laugh about it now instead of in 6 months.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
And if we go, I just successfully spoke negatively to myself, it does the same thing. So I was like if I find something that I think might work, I grab hold of it and I go slightly obsessive with it. And like, this may be my high functioning autism coming through, but um, so when I came across this, I did effectively a narration of my life through my entire waking day for about 2 weeks and completely killed my negative internal voice. So I just woke up. I just took my covers off my bed. I just got up. I just brushed my teeth. I just got dressed. I just had a shower, whatever it happens to be, like all the way through my day.
Yep.
And by using that, I just successfully all through the day. The negative voice just didn't have space. And if it did pop up, I just successfully talked negatively to myself, and you get to laugh about it. And instantly it pulls you out of that state, because you can't stay in the state. I just successfully got angry. Like, as soon as you say that, you stop being angry and you start being aware of the fact that you were angry a moment ago.
Yes.
So it's one of the most powerful self-development tools that I've come across. That and the memory work, I think, are the two keys to partially working with self-mastery, at least. They're really powerful.
I just successfully realized I should have read that Huna book because we spoke about that book a couple of years ago, and I got it. It's on my to read pile and it hasn't got through.
Urban Shaman, I think it is. Is that the one?
Um, I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a few really good ones.
You sent me a picture of the cover of it, and I went and got it.
Right.
It's the one you read.
Yeah.
Just have no got.
There's a few things by Serge Gay King, like, anyone that's in healing work, I think would do wonders to read his entire library.
Yes, it was a mesmerism discussion we were having where you recommended it.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful chat. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure it's sparked some ideas off for other people. It's helped me click a couple of little things in my mind. So I've gratefully appreciated this. Thank you. You've successfully inspired me.
Well, I've successfully had a nice chat with you as well.
Fantastic. And I'm presuming from this chat, some people are going to be curious about you. So can you give us the details of how they can contact you and what sort of stuff you do, your area?
Yeah. So the rowanramsay.co.uk. I'm assuming you'll put a wee link down there, because
Will do.
people quite often call me Roman and Raymond and all sorts of different names. And yeah, I do mind body stuff. I look at like the whole system as one thing. So I'm trained in hypnosis and EFT and NLP and these sort of things. Also yoga nidra, that sort of stuff. But I look at your system as a complete thing and help you tweak it. That's probably the easiest way to put it. And yeah, it's fun.
Yes. You work online and in person as well, do you?
Online, in person, yeah. I've got a space in London, and yeah, work on Zoom with clients all over the world. So yeah, we can certainly have a chat about anything anyone wants to talk about. Everything from psychedelics and meditation to hypnosis and ketogenics and breath work. And I'm about to release a book on breath work actually next month. So
Okay.
it's been a
That,
couple of years in the making. So that'll be
well, we might have another chat for your breathwork book later on then.
yeah.
Sounds
Cool.
fantastic.
There's a memory one in the making as well that'll be a very interesting piece. So watch out for that as well.
Yes, the little bit you told me about that last week sounds like it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
I look forward to that one for sure. And then I know the people listening to this would love it.
Excellent.
I'll update the links if you're listening to this in like a year from now. It'll be in the show notes.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you. Since it's the beginning of the day for you, have a fantastic day.
Yeah, and have a fantastic sleep. Go and practice pretending you're asleep and pretending you're dreaming.
I will.
Yeah, have a play with that. Let me know how you get on. And thanks again. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and perhaps learned something new. If you did, I'd love for you to subscribe or drop a review on whatever favourite podcatcher you have, or if you've been enjoying the video versions on YouTube or Facebook, do it there. If something really did click home for you with this episode, perhaps it could benefit one of your friends or family. If so, it'd really help if you shared this on your social medias. Until next time, you've been listening to Akasha Talks with Lance Baker.